بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كلام الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها فإن كل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار وبعد. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, inshallah we'll continue from where we left off last week. So we're currently still on the introduction. And just to recap very quickly, inshallah, we started discussing the importance of understanding Islamic financial transactions or interfinancial dealings in Islam. What type of transactions are halal, what type of transactions are haram. So what is the significance of knowing about this, and why should we get a firm grounding in this? And of course, one of the things we mentioned was that this enables us to have a halal income, and inshallah to keep ourselves away from haram income. And we mentioned that haram income is something which prevents a person's dua being accepted by Allah Azza wa Jal. So it's extremely essential that we strive hard to inshallah make sure that our earning is halal as far as possible. Then we started going through some of the features of the Islamic financial system or the Islamic economic system. And we mentioned some things. One of them was that Islam has not restricted the number of transactions. Rather, the number of transactions can be any number, but of course within a set guideline. Right? So Islam has actually set perimeters within which the Islamic or within which the transactions will be controlled. However, the number of transactions it has not regulated. Right? So this was one of the examples, and we did 4 last week. We did 4 of those features last week, and today inshallah we'll continue with the others as an introduction. So these are not all of the features of the Islamic financial system. However, they are some of the main features of the Islamic financial system or the Islamic economic system. And the one we finished off with was the balanced one. The balanced one. All right? And does anyone remember the example we gave for balance? That the fact that Islam has created a balance from both sides. So Islam gives rights to both the buyer as well as the seller. So what example did we give? The example of regulating, very good. So the example of regulating the prices. So Islam has not regulated the prices. So Islam does not say that this is the price that should be set. You can't go higher than this price, or the seller cannot set a price which is higher than this price because it will be difficult for the buyer to buy it. No. Islam has not set that or not regulated the prices in such a manner. However, in saying that, just as an extra point, because someone raised this question, and that is that, well, is it that under no circumstances can prices be regulated? So the answer to that question is no. There are certain exceptions. However, the general rule is that prices cannot be regulated. However, under certain circumstances, Islam regulates the prices. Islam regulates the prices. And of course, we said that the main reason for the fact that Islam does not regulate prices is that there should be mutual agreement from both sides, right? Mutual agreement. from the buyer as well as the seller. So the seller is happy to buy it at that price, and the buyer, the buyer is happy to buy it at that price, and the seller is also happy to sell it at that price. So if someone regulates the prices, that means the seller is not happy to sell it at the price, right? So it defeats one of the main principles in Islam. So continuing further, inshallah. By the way, I forgot to mention this last week, and that is that inshallah, for those of you that are interested, we will be having a small examination or a small test after a certain time, and inshallah I will announce it well beforehand, at least a month in advance, that we will be having a test after we finish this chapter or after we reach this point. And for those of you that want to sit the test, inshallah, you are able to sit the test, and inshallah we will also be having a certification for those who successfully complete that part of the course. So for example, if we complete sale transactions, so inshallah we'll be having different sections. So the first one that we'll be discussing is Aqdul Bay', or the sale transaction. All right. So for example, if you complete the sale transaction, you write a test on it, and you pass inshallah, then you will be given a certification that you have successfully completed this part of the course, and what are the things that you have actually studied, etc. So this can serve as something beneficial for you, so that inshallah in the future, if you actually wish to conduct workshops or conduct some classes for your family or even for other people, then you have something to show that inshallah you're qualified to be able to deliver this. And of course, firstly it's for your own benefit, and secondly, of course, if you wish to pass this knowledge on to other people, then this will also serve that purpose, inshallah. So the next feature of the Islamic economic system is that Islam has given preference to the interest of the market over the interest of the individual. To the interest of the market over the interest of the individual. Now we said last week, we mentioned it, that a lot of the ahkam or a lot of the rulings in Islam, they are actually based on giving the interest of the community or the society preference over the interest of the individual where they clash. If they don't clash, then Islam gives equal rights to both the market or the society as well as the individual. But where they clash, then the priority will be given to the interest of the market rather than the interest of the individual. And an example of that is, we find, for example, certain practices forbidden in Islam. One of them is mentioned in the following hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is narrated by both Bukhari and Muslim, or recorded by both Bukhari and Muslim, in which the Prophet of Allah ﷺ said that Naha Rasulullah ﷺ an yabi'a hadirun libadin wa in kana akhahu li abihi wa ummih. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ prohibited the sale of the urbanite to the nomadic, even if it may be his paternal or maternal half-brother. So this is the hadith just on the screen, inshallah. What does this mean? We have to understand that this particular type of transaction was present at the time of the Prophet ﷺ amongst the Arabs and others as well living at the time. And what used to happen was the following. So obviously there used to be people who were city dwellers or town dwellers, those who would live in big towns or big cities. All right? And then there were others who were living outside of the cities, Bedouins, nomads, who would travel and not actually living or residing in the actual city. So obviously some of them, as you can assume, would have been farmers, right? So these farmers, as an example, would harvest their crop, and then obviously they would want to sell that crop to the people of the city, right? So when they would come to the city, they would be unaware of what the market prices are. They would be unaware of what the market prices are. So in essence, what would happen is this, that an agent who acts as an intermediary in between these Bedouins or these farmers and the city dwellers, he would take advantage of this situation. So before these nomads or these Bedouins or these farmers would come to the city, right, this agent who is a city dweller, would go to this farmer, and he would say that, okay, what have you got? He would say maybe, as an example, dates or mangoes or whatever, all right? And then, he would say, all right, so I can sell this for you. I can sell this for you, so that it's easier for you. All right, the reason why this used to happen is, number one, as you can imagine, the farmers that would want to come to the city, they wouldn't like to stay in the city. I mean, they would obviously like to go back to their homes. I mean, obviously, any of us who would go abroad to, for example, on business trips or whatever, we would like to come home as soon as possible to our families and to our hometown, right? So in a similar manner, even these these nomads or these farmers who were coming from the outside, they would want to go back to their homes as well. So the quicker that they can get their goods sold, the better it is for them, right? So if this guy or this agent now comes to him and he says that I will buy all of these goods off you for this price, then obviously the seller would be like, I'm not losing out on much, right? I'm selling it at a profit anyway, and plus at the same time, I'm making a quick sale. I can return back to to my family and conduct my business there, right? So it works in the interest of the nomad, right? However, there are a couple of problems with this. All right, there are a couple of problems with this. Firstly, the agent, what he does then is, firstly, he buys these goods at a lower price than what the farmer would have sold it in the actual city. Because the farmer doesn't know what the market value is. So for example, if all of his goods are worth, say, $10,000, as an example, $10,000, right? In the market. So if he were to sell it in the city, he would get $10,000 for it. Now this guy, this agent, he goes to the farmer and says that I'll buy it off you for $8,000 or $7,000 or whatever, all right, at a lower price. And he buys it off him. Now of course the farmer is happy, so that's why he agrees to the trade in the first place. But after that, what this guy does, this agent, he comes to the city and he sells it, but he sells it now at exorbitant prices. He sells it at much higher prices than what the market value is. So what does the market value now become? It becomes either 12,000, 13,000, 15,000, maybe even 20,000, depending on how much he has raised the prices of the goods that he's selling. And if many people start to do this, what happens? The market value, what happens to the market value? It goes up. So it's artificially inflated, right? So these prices have artificially gone up, right? Now, why is it problematic for the markets? Because the market prices have gone up. And because the market prices have gone up, obviously, this then reduces the demand. This then reduces the demand. Now, inshallah, we'll look at the supply and demand chart as well. For those of you who have studied a little bit of economics, you will understand what supply and demand is. So the higher the prices, the less the demand will be. And the lower the prices, generally the higher the demand will be, the demand for those goods, right? So the demand will decrease. The demand will decrease for those goods because the prices are exorbitant. Now, what this also does is that it creates, artificially inflated prices. Now, Islam has prohibited this type of sale to protect the market. Why? Because even if it was a little bit inconvenient for the nomad or for the farmer to come to the city, all right, and to sell it, because he might have to live there for a few days or a month or whatever, for a longer period of time than if he would have just sold it to the agent, for a quick sale. I mean, it's a little bit of inconvenience for the nomad. However, he would sell it at a lower price. So even if he didn't know what the market value was, right? So he didn't know what the market value was. So he sold it at a lower price than what the market value is, than what he would actually get for it. But that's fine from an Islamic perspective, that's fine. Why? Because then the buyers are actually benefiting from it. And when the buyers actually buy it at a lower price, then they would sell it at a lower price as well. I mean, they would sell it at a higher price than the original, but that higher price will still be lower than if the agent had bought it and sold it to the people. So there will be more trade. In other words, there will be more trade. and the market will remain healthy. The market will remain healthy. So in order for the market to remain healthy, there has to be more trade, right? Right? So Islam has brought in this prohibition to protect the market and to make sure that the market remains healthy. Alright, so I hope you've understood why this prohibition is there. And of course, this is the meaning of preference to the market over the individual. The next one is that if a person wants to invest money, then Islam has made such a system where it has allowed people to invest money if there is a risk involved in it. If there is no risk involved in it, then there is something wrong with that type of transaction from an Islamic perspective. Alright? So for you to be able to reap some rewards of your investment, there has to be some risk of a loss involved in it as well. Alright? So when you do business, for example, you invest money. For example, you want to trade in, I don't know, clothes, right? So you buy, some clothes and then you sell it in the market. But now there's a risk involved, whether people will buy it or not, whether they will buy it at the price which is higher than what you originally bought it for, right? Higher than the capital price, right? So Islam has basically made the system in such a way where it has allowed and made those type of transactions or investments, to be more specific, permissible where there is a risk of a loss involved. If there is no risk of loss involved, then Islam has made those types of transactions impermissible and forbidden. And for this reason, we find transactions like interest, right, interest-based transactions, to be haram. Now, for example, in the bank, and of course we'll discuss this in much more detail. This is just some quick examples, inshallah. When you put your money in a savings account, what happens? It's like you're investing, right? It's like you're investing, right? But this investment, there is no risk of loss involved, because you definitely know that it's going to increase. You definitely know that it's going to increase. There is absolutely no risk of loss involved. So whether it's a small increase or whether it's a large increase, it's definitely going to increase. It's not going to go down. Alright? So for this reason, this is one of the reasons why interest has been made impermissible in Islam. The next one, inshallah. The Islamic economic system has also, so this is number 7 by the way, the Islamic economic system has also disallowed dealing, meaning the sale and purchase of debts. Hence, many transactions on the stock market involving debt-based securities are actually impermissible. Now, again, just a very quick example, inshallah. We'll deal with this in a lot more detail when we come to it. There is a type of transaction where, the stock market, right? The stock market where you buy and sell shares. But there is a certain type of security that you can actually buy, there are different examples of this. One of the examples is a corporate bond. So what happens in a corporate bond is the investor, he invests money in a company. Now this can work either of two ways. One is, when you invest money in the company, you get a share of that company, right? So you invest in the capital of that company. So you get a share of that company. Now this is halal as long as, of course, other conditions are fulfilled, like the transactions or the type of trading that company does is halal and all of those things. As long as those conditions are met, it is fine. There's nothing wrong with this type of share trading or buying these types of shares. However, what a corporate bond is that the investor invests money, right? Investor invests money, and that is actually like a loan to the company. Now what happens then is, because it's a loan, there is interest that is accumulated on it, and that interest is then given to the investor. So he gets returns through the interest. He gets returns, the investor gets returns through the interest. Now these shares, which is actually like a loan, right? Which is actually a loan which he has given the company. These loans can now be traded to someone else. So he's got a share, but it's a loan, right? It's a share, but it's a loan, right? It's not a capital in the company. It's not a share of the company. It's a loan that he has given to the company. Now he can trade this share or this security. It's called a security, right? But it's a debt-based security, right? He can trade it to someone else. So he can give this share to someone else. But now this other person, he has bought the loan that he has lended to someone else, and he will be then receiving returns based on the interest. Does that make sense? Yep. All right. So dealing or purchase and the purchasing and the selling of debt is not allowed in Islam. The next one. So number 8, feature number 8. So as you can see, it is based on gambling. So this is the example. The Islamic financial system has also put a condition on the two parties, meaning the buyer and the seller, involved in the contract of sale, that they have knowledge of the sale item and the price of the sale item. It is for this reason that practices like gambling have been made haram in Islam. Why have they been made haram in Islam? Because say, for example, you bet that the Eagles will win the grand final, all right? And they will win by however many points. And the price is, for example, whatever, $1.50 or $2 or whatever, right? So you are actually putting money, right? But you don't know what return you will get. You don't actually know what return you will get. All right? And it is similar with gambling in casinos, for example. You put money, but you don't know what is the return on that money. All right? So both the price, so the price is known. In gambling, the price is known, the price, but the return is unknown. All right? The sale item is actually unknown. And it is for this reason that transactions which are similar to gambling and betting and so on and so forth, these have been made haram in Islam. The two parties have knowledge of the sale item and price. Yeah, so the sale item is not known. So in gambling, the sale item is not known. So meaning that the price is, in there the price is known, right? But the other side is not known. What you're going to get in return is unknown, right? What you're going to get in return is unknown. So for example, if you have placed a bet to, for, say, a computer, right? The computer is the return or, the item. But you're not sure if you're going to get this computer or not. It depends on some uncertainties. All right, and we'll come to the uncertainty part as well. But this is something different. This is where the sale item is actually unknown. And based on uncertainty also, a transaction will be deemed haram or impermissible as well. All right, but here it's talking about having knowledge of the sale item as well as the price. All right. Another example actually of not knowing what the sale item is, is, for example, in according to some scholars, by the way, there's a difference of opinion, and we'll inshallah discuss that. I know it is a hot topic, and that is insurance. So insurance, the price, so the premium is known, right? But what you're going to get in return is unknown. Perhaps one year, if there is an accident, you will get, say, $5,000 to fix your car or $1,000 to fix your car. Another year, you might not get anything because there was no accident, and so on and so forth. All right, so there was no damage to your property. Therefore, you will not get any return from the insurance company. So this is the way that some scholars look at it. This is the way some scholars look at it and deem insurance to be impermissible. However, according to other scholars, insurance is permissible, and we will discuss that when the time comes, inshallah.
One is related to the example does it apply to all sort of agents, like they're dealing in here, like for
All right.
property?
Yep. Yeah. So inshallah we'll come to that. We'll come to that later when we talk about agents and so on and so forth. Yes. Second one.
Second one is you just gave example of corporate bond.
Yep.
Like someone is giving buying shares.
Yep.
And it's like a loan.
Yep.
That he is for the
So he's actually giving the company a loan. Yep.
But I heard about Imam Hanifa rahmatullah alayh, that people used to give him money as a amana, and a lot of money was gathering with him, and then he asked people to give him as a loan so that he can invest somewhere.
Yep.
Because amana, he can't do anything with that amana. He has to return when they ask. So he asked people to give money as a loan so that he can invest somewhere.
Yep.
And then
Yep. So inshallah, all of those scenarios, inshallah, we'll come to those. We'll come to all of those scenarios, inshallah. So this is a little bit outside of what. So here we're just discussing the features at present. We haven't actually even, gone into the actual subject matter. Here we're just discussing the features and giving some examples. All right. So all of those questions, inshallah, we'll answer it in due time. And again, just a reminder, inshallah, not directed at anyone, inshallah. The questions which are directly related to the topic that we're discussing in class, inshallah, we'll have a short Q&A if time permits. We'll have it, towards the end of the class. Questions which are not related, please don't ask it, during the class Q&A time. You can ask it outside, as many people do. All right, so you are most welcome to ask it at that time. But in class, inshallah, we'll try and limit the questions as much as possible, just because we want to get through the content, as efficiently as possible, inshallah. So even the questions related to the content itself, try to keep it towards the end if we do have time for a short Q&A. But questions, and also just a reminder, inshallah, to the other brothers again, for those of you who perhaps weren't present here last week, I know that there are many, many questions on your mind related to insurance, related to stock markets, etc., etc. As I mentioned last week, please have patience till we actually get to the topic. All right, we'll discuss it in detail. We'll understand the fundamentals, and I hope that inshallah by the time that we actually discuss it, you won't even have questions after that. In fact, many other questions will also be answered. All right, once you understand the principles and everything, many other questions will also be answered, inshallah. So please have patience. We'll go through it step by step in a systematic manner, inshallah. All right. Okay, so next one. So this was with regards to the sale item should be known, as well as the price should be known to both the parties, meaning to both the buyer and the seller. The next one is ownership. Ownership. That the person who buys the item, they should get the full ownership before they actually make any other tasarruf on that item, meaning before they do any other transaction on that item. All right, so in order for a person to do a transaction on an item, the person has to get full ownership of the item. All right, for this reason and because of this principle, many stock market transactions have been deemed haram. One of those examples, inshallah, is day trading. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of day trading. Day trading is basically when it's quick on the spot trading. All right, it's called spot trading also sometimes. All right, so day trading, what happens here is that the person, buys a share, all right, and then he pretty much sells it very quickly as well. But when the person actually buys this share, the full ownership has not been given to the person who has bought the share. The full ownership it has been recorded. So in the exchange, it gets recorded, all right? It gets recorded on the system. However, the full ownership has not actually been given to the person who bought the share, right? And before that, he actually sells it. So before he gets full ownership, he has already sold it. All right? So for this, the actual ownership only gets given to the person after approximately 1 or 2 days or 3 days. I don't know what the exact time frame is, but somewhere around there. But some people, as soon as they buy it, they sell it straight away. All right? Or when the price goes up slightly, they sell it straight away. All right? So this is the way that, day trading works. So in a lot of these transactions where it involves day trading, right, the ownership does not get transferred to the buyer. And the buyer makes another transaction on the thing that he has bought before he actually gets ownership of that item. And for this reason, many of these types of transactions have been deemed to be impermissible from an Islamic perspective. Required. There are many other examples as well, but we're just, inshallah, trying to limit the examples until we come to the actual topic, inshallah. So buyer has to get full ownership before taking any further action on the sale item. Next one. One thing's for certain, uncertainty. All right? So obviously this one is related to the famous Bay'ul Gharar, by which principle many scholars deem insurance to be haram. Many scholars deem insurance to be haram. However, there's a lot of discussion on this issue, inshallah. We'll come to it when we come to it, inshallah. However, it's called Bay'ul Gharar. And Bay'ul Gharar is something which the Prophet ﷺ prohibited. Bay'ul Gharar is actually a type of transaction where there is an uncertainty or speculation involved. So for example, if I say to you that whatever I catch today when I go fishing, who likes fishing, by the way? Inshallah, I should go one day, inshallah. All right, so if I tell you that whatever fish I catch today, it's all yours for this price. So for example, I say that I'll give you all the fish that I catch today for $100. And I know for a fact that I'm not going to catch a lot. All right? So $100 is quite a bit for not much catch. Right? However, this is a speculative type of transaction. Why? Because firstly, the buyer doesn't know how many fish I'm going to catch. Right? I could catch one. I could even catch, 10, 15 snappers. All right? Which I've never done, by the way. All right? So it could even be that. Right? So you don't know what I'm actually going to catch. All right? So because there is speculation involved and uncertainty involved, therefore, this type of transaction has been deemed impermissible from an Islamic perspective. Because you don't know what you're going to get in return. So in other words, the point is that the price should be completely known, that it's $100 or $200 or $50 or $1.50 or $1.99, whatever it is. It should be known to the person who's buying it and to the person who's selling it as well. All right? Secondly, the thing that is being sold should also be known as far as possible. Now, in saying that, everything has a level of uncertainty. Everything. Everything has gharar. Everything. All right? So although Bay'ul Gharar has been made impermissible, what this means, there's a little bit more detail to it. Because everything has gharar. So in other words, what I mean by this is that you want to say buy, a thawb, for example, a thawb, right? So you want to buy this particular thawb or this exact, design or this exact model of thawb, right? Now you want to buy it from me. Now I have 5 pieces of those thawbs, and I give 1 piece to you. That 1 piece will not be exactly 100% the same as this. It will be 99% the same, but not 100%. Because here there might be 5 threads. In the one that I'm giving you, there might be 6 threads. Or there might be 4 threads. Or something along those lines. Or the gap between the stitching in this thawb, which I've given you as a sample, which I've showed you as a sample, there might be 2 centimeters. In the one that I give you, all right, in the packet, all right, which is packaged, in the one that I give you, there is 2.2 centimeters between the threading, right? Between the stitches, right? So there is always a level of uncertainty in any type of trade. But this minor uncertainty is not taken into account from an Islamic perspective. That is the reason why the majority of the simple trades are, halal. There's nothing wrong with it, although there is a minute level of uncertainty in there. All right, so what this means is when there is a larger amount of uncertainty in a transaction. And this is one of the angles from which some scholars who deem insurance to be permissible, they say that it falls within the acceptable amount of gharar, or the acceptable amount of uncertainty in a transaction. Does that make sense? Yep. So what we said is, uncertainty in transactions is something which will make a transaction impermissible, right? However, we also said that every transaction has a level of uncertainty in it, all right? Little uncertainty, but every transaction nevertheless has some amount of uncertainty. However, that little amount of uncertainty is overlooked. It is not counted. It is not counted. It is the major or a higher level of uncertainty that is actually counted, and that has been prohibited by Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I hope that makes sense, inshallah. Nevertheless, we'll continue with the next one. So, by the way, Bay'ul Gharar, they are called aleatory contracts. The next one. So Islam has, so this is number 11. Islam has prohibited the acquisition of wealth through unlawful means. All right, the acquisition of wealth through unlawful means. So this means, getting wealth through bribes, for example, through bribes. So although the majority of the other, other conditions are fulfilled from an Islamic perspective, because what happens in a bribe? Both the parties are happy to give the bribe? Pretty much, right? Both the parties are happy, so the person who's giving the bribe is actually happy to give the bribe. Why? Because he'll get some benefit in return, right? And that benefit is known or unknown? It is known from both sides, right? So the price is known, the benefit that you're getting, the return that you're getting is also known, right? So many of these conditions which Islam has placed in transactions, they're actually fulfilled. So the only condition that is not fulfilled is that bribes are haram. All right, rishwa is haram in Islam. All right, so for this reason, Islam has forbidden acquisition of wealth through unlawful means. Other examples are like oppression. Acquiring wealth through oppression. This has also been deemed impermissible, and others. So these are just two examples, inshallah. The next one. So this is number 12, inshallah, and this is the final feature which we'll be discussing, during the introduction. As I said, there are many other features as well, but these are some of the more important and some of the more highlighted features in the Islamic economic system, of the Islamic economic system. All right, so the next one is this. Guidelines for every place and era. Now, there is no doubt that the financial dealings and transactions of today, they are much more complex than the ones which were found during the era of the Prophet ﷺ. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the majority of them were pretty simple and straightforward to understand and straightforward to actually go through with them as well. All right. However, in today's time, we find many different types of transactions. We have like things like binary options, and you have like futures trading and whatnot in the stock market, and you have many other things as well. Even within insurance itself, we have a lot of different types of insurance as well. So it's not just one type of insurance. There is life insurance and all of these other things as well, which weren't found during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Subhanallah, in today's time, you can practically insure anything. You can practically insure anything. You can even insure your salary as well. So if tomorrow you were to lose your job, you can even get that insured. So you can ensure that you will be paid a certain amount when you're out of a job as well. All right. So there's almost everything that you can insure. There's even things like for example, deformation or age. Some people even insure certain body parts as well. I don't know if you've heard certain stars and movie stars and whatnot insuring certain body parts. All right, I don't want to give examples because some of them are a little bit inappropriate. However, this is what it is done in today's time. So you have like, some of them are pretty crazy and outrageous. However, you find many different types of complex transactions in the world today. In saying that, the guidelines that Islam has placed for the economic system is very clear, inshallah, very clear. For someone of understanding, he can, inshallah, apply it in a way which is pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jal. All right? So even though the transactions of today are complex, the actual principles, if we actually understand them properly, we can apply it to these complex transactions and then make an educated judgment of whether these transactions are actually haram or halal from an Islamic perspective. All right? One example. لا ضرر ولا ضرر. A famous hadith, a very, very famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is also in the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah. Right? لا ضرر ولا ضرار. There is no harm and there is no reciprocating of harm. Many Islamic edicts or fatwa are based upon this principle. Many of them, especially in interfinancial transactions. Many of the fatwa are actually based upon this principle. لا ضرر ولا ضرار. There is no harm and there is no reciprocating of harm as well. There is no harm and there is no reciprocating of harm. In fact, just as a side note, many jurists actually consider this to be half of Islamic jurisprudence or half of Islamic fiqh. This hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or this principle, many jurists actually consider it to be half of fiqh because it is applied like in so many rulings. Anyway, what are some of the implications, some examples, inshallah? One of them is the return of faulty goods. The return of faulty goods. In Islam, it is called, or from the Islamic terminology, it is called khiyarul aib. Khiyarul aib. Or the choice or the option to return a good because it is faulty. Now, of course, there are conditions to it. There are conditions. You can't just return it under any condition. All right, there are conditions to it, and we will look at those conditions, inshallah. However, Islam has given the option to the buyer to return the goods and to get the money back, obviously, to return the goods and get the money back if there is a fault found in it. Now, obviously, there is a lot of discussion as to what type of fault because of what type of faults are you allowed to return the goods and so on and so forth. So all of these discussions and these details are there, which will inshallah be discussed when we get to the topic, inshallah. So this is one example. How does this fall under the la darara wa la dirar rule? The la darara wa la dirar rule, it will fall under this in the following way. So if a seller knows that there is a fault in the item that he is selling, then he will buy faulty items and he will try to conceal them as much as possible. All right, he'll try to conceal them and hide them from the buyer as much as possible, and then he'll sell them. And if that option was not given to the buyer by Islam, then he would not be able to return it. He or she would not be able to return it. And obviously this will create harm for the person or for the buyers in general. And the sellers will then take advantage if this principle wasn't there, or if this ruling in Islam wasn't there. The sellers would then take that advantage and they'll sell faulty goods left, right, and center. Right? They'll sell faulty goods left, right, and center. So for this reason, Islam has prohibited certain types of things and has allowed certain types of things under this rule. So it has allowed the khiyarul mabi', the option to return faulty goods if the goods are deemed to be faulty under the requirements of the Sharia. Make sense, inshallah, so far? Another example. Buying and selling products which are deemed to be harmful to the buyer. Which are deemed to be harmful to the buyer. So obviously things like buying and selling drugs. Buying and selling drugs have been made haram in Islam. Why? Because even though all of the conditions might be met, right? Still, because it causes harm to the person, therefore it has been deemed impermissible under this rule. Under this rule, لا ضرر ولا ضرار. Another example is the prohibition of buying and selling under duress. Buying and selling under duress. So if someone has bought or sold something under duress, then that transaction will be made null and void. Will be made null and void from an Islamic perspective. And of course, the harm of this is clear. If this were allowed, then the harm of it is very clear. And to prevent this harm, obviously, under the rule or under the principle of la darara wa la dirar, Islam has deemed this type of transaction or selling under duress to be impermissible. Also, another type of transaction, and there is a little bit more detail to this example, and we will discuss that when the time comes, inshallah. But nevertheless, I'll just mention the example, and that is the example of selling an item to someone who is definitely going to use it for haram, who you know for sure is definitely going to use it for haram. Can someone give me an example? Selling knives to a gangster. Good. Sorry? Selling of grapes to whom? Yeah, selling of grapes to those who produce alcoholic beverages, right? Selling of grapes or malt or whatever other things. Selling those to those who produce alcoholic beverages. So even this type of transaction has been deemed to be haram. Of course, there is a little bit more detail to all of these, to this example, and we will discuss that inshallah when the time comes. And of course, other than these four examples, there are countless other examples that actually fall under this principle, which will inshallah be discussed ahead. So return of faulty goods, prohibition of the sale of drugs, prohibition of buying or selling under duress, and selling to someone who will use it for haram. So these are the examples that we gave, inshallah. So now, we're going to go through the topics that we're going to be discussing in this course, inshallah. Now, although these topics might sound very straightforward to you, but to discuss all of these topics, or even one of these topics, is going to take quite a lot of time. So, inshallah, as I mentioned, we will discuss it in a reasonable amount of detail. And of course, I will keep in mind the level of all of us sitting here as well, inshallah. But I want to discuss in a reasonable amount of detail, inshallah, without going into the overly technical things. Inshallah. So the first one is the most straightforward and the most common type of transaction, which is the sale contract. Now, when I mention these and when they come up on the screen, bear in mind, inshallah, I'm not going to go through the definition. So if you know what they are, you know what they are. If you don't know what they are, inshallah, when we come to it, we'll discuss it in detail, inshallah. We'll discuss the definition and so on and so forth. Because with some of them, there is a difference of opinion on the definition as well. So even that is a little bit detailed. All right. So therefore, we will not discuss these right now. So I'll just mention what we're going to be talking about, inshallah. So the first one is the sale contract. The second one is the forward sale contract. You give me the money now, or I'll give you the goods now, you give me the money later. Forward sale contract. By the way, that wasn't the definition. The third one, order to manufacture for purchase. Number 4, contracting agreements. Some of them are more contemporary transactions. Number 5, tenders and bids. Number 6, importing. Seven, leasing. So I think a lot of these are pretty straightforward. I think a lot of you must be knowing what these mean anyway. Rendering a service against a reward. I'll just give an example. Again, not a definition, just an example. You tell someone, my child is missing, go and find him. So upon the successful execution of this, the person who has rendered this service will get a reward or will get the payment. So for example, $1,000 if you find my boy. And a very common one that you sometimes see the posters stuck on the traffic lights sometimes, right? Reward for finding my dog, or reward for finding my cat. $500 reward for finding my dog. All right? So, this is a very common one. Next one, the right of preemption. The right of preemption. Again, I'll just give an example, because I don't want to keep a lot of you in the dark completely. So we won't go through the definition, but an example, inshallah. I share a house with someone, all right, in ownership, right? So I own half the house, the other person owns half the house, right? Now I want to sell my half of the house or my share of the house, right? So the person who is actually in partnership with me for that house has the first right to buy out my share. Has the first right to buy out my share in Islam, from an Islamic perspective. It is called shufa. Anyway, that's all I'm going to give you for now.
So can right of preemption can be called as shufa?
Yeah, the right of preemption is called shufa in Arabic. Number 10, the transfer of debts. An example was the example we gave of corporate bonds and transferring that share to someone else, right? Number 11, riba. It's a famous one. All right, so I think this will be very, very relevant to the vast majority of you. Not that you're involved in it, I'm not saying from that perspective. I'm saying that you will be interested to know what constitutes as riba and what doesn't constitute as riba, right? Number 12, money exchange or currency exchange. I don't know if you know this, the forex trading, right? Forex trading, right? So sometimes what happens is, I mean, this is basically exchanging in currency, right? But one of the transactions that is actually, actually deemed to be a haram type of transaction is where, obviously, to make a profit in it, you have to invest large amounts of money, right? But many people don't have large amounts of money to invest so that they can make a decent amount of profit on it, right? So what they do, what certain brokers do, is that they allow the buyer to put forward a little amount, say as an example $1, but this will, and the $49, so they will invest $50, for example. The broker will invest $50 on behalf of the buyer, right? On behalf of the investor, rather, to be more accurate, right? So, but you'll only ask the investor to put forward $1, right? And the $49 will be like a loan, that is given to him. So the broker will invest on his behalf $50 with $1 put up front, an upfront payment. All right. So obviously, because there is debt involved in it and lending involved in it, and obviously, as you can imagine, there would be interest involved as well. Therefore, this type of transaction has been deemed to be impermissible. But anyway, this is just an example. Money exchange. 13 is banking. So obviously we'll be discussing Islamic banking. Again, something which I think the majority of you would be interested in. The next one is stock markets. Stock markets. All right, by the way, if, just to clear one misconception, just buying shares, there's nothing wrong with just buying shares, all right? So obviously there are other conditions to it, but just buying shares in and of itself is not something which is haram. Number 15, companies and partnerships. And this is the final one. However, under each of these, there will be many types of transactions which will be under these categories, inshallah. So there might be many things that you don't see on there that you might have thought that will be discussed. So yes, inshallah, we'll discuss all of those. However, they will be under one of these categories, inshallah. They will be under one of these categories, inshallah. All right, so the methodology. So this is going to be the final thing that we'll be discussing as part of the introduction, inshallah. And then after this, we will be starting with the first transaction. And what is the first transaction that we will be discussing as the primary topic? Sale transaction. All right, aqdul bay', the sale transaction. So this is what we'll be discussing first, inshallah. So here in the methodology, I'm just going to be explaining what we will be discussing, in what detail we will be discussing them, and in what order we will be discussing them, and so on and so forth. All right, so this is what we're going to be talking about now, inshallah. So the first one, jurisprudential rulings, meaning fiqhi rulings, right? So I'm sure that all of you know what fiqh is, right? So fiqhi rulings is the first thing that we will be discussing. So obviously this is a topic of fiqh anyway. Money matters is a topic of fiqh. So this is what we'll be discussing as the primary thing, the main focus of the course, inshallah. Now it will be presented in a systematic sequence, inshallah. So what I mean by systematic sequence is that there will be the primary topic. So for example, aqdul bay', right? Sale transactions. Under that, there will be certain subtopics. Under that, there will be certain subtopics. And under that, obviously, there will be certain branches and so on and so forth. And that's how we'll be dividing our discussion, inshallah. So as far as possible, we will make it as systematic an approach as possible, inshallah. All right, so we don't want to be confusing ourselves. We want to make sure that we know that what does this fall under, what does that fall under. Is this a primary category or is this a subcategory, and so on and so forth. All right. Each ruling will be highlighted and made evident. Each ruling will be highlighted and made evident. As an example, exchanging gold, for example. All right, exchanging gold, it has to be done hand in hand. Exchanging gold has to be done hand in hand. All right, this is a ruling. All right, so obviously under this there will be a little bit of discussion, etc. But whenever a ruling comes, that will be highlighted and made clear that now this is a ruling. All right, and whatever discussion will be there will be a discussion rather than the ruling. So a ruling will be there, and after that, for example, we'll get the difference of opinion amongst the scholars, and then some of the proofs of the different opinions and so on and so forth. And that's how we'll be discussing it. So right at the top, we'll highlight what the actual jurisprudential ruling is, inshallah. Next, definitions and categories will also be highlighted. So when we discuss, for example, the sale transaction, the aqdul bay', we'll make sure we know the definition of aqd. We'll make sure we know the definition of bay'. And then when we combine them together, we also know what the definition is. All right? So we will obviously be referring to a lot of the Arabic terminologies as well. All right? Because ultimately all of these things come from the Arabic terminology. All right? So we'll be discussing the Arabic terminology, and as far as possible, I will try and simplify it, inshallah. And then obviously the categories that come under those definitions, they will also be highlighted, inshallah. Next, we'll be discussing the differences of opinion. The differences of opinion. And this is something I think which a lot of you, again, will be interested in. With regards to the differences of opinion, I will make it very clear as to whom we'll refer to. Firstly, we'll be referring to all of the primary and popular opinions of the classical and early scholars. Of the classical and early scholars. All right? So this is something which we will definitely discuss, inshallah. All of the popular opinions, inshallah. If some of them are very minor opinions, minor in the sense that, they're not really regarded and they're not really popular and they're not put in practice today, then I might leave some of those out. Some of those we'll discuss as well, but I might leave some of those out. But all of the popular opinions, inshallah, as far as possible, we will be mentioning those in this course. So classical differences given preference. What does this mean? This means that, so there are two types of transactions or dealings, right? One of them is where the basis of that transaction or the basis of those dealings are found in the classical books or the earlier books, right? So obviously the sale transaction, very straightforward, it is found in the earlier books, no doubt, all right? So this is found in the earlier books. So whatever type of transaction is actually found in the earlier books, we will be giving preference to the differences of opinion amongst the classical scholars. All right? And we will be mentioning some differences of opinion amongst the contemporary scholars as well. It's not that we will be completely leaving it out, but we'll be giving more preference to the differences of opinion amongst the classical scholars, because that mainly should suffice anyway. All right? That should suffice, and that should be enough. All right, because that is, quite encompassing, because this type of transaction has already been there before, so it's nothing new. So someone in today's time coming and saying something different, a lot of the time not much relevance is given to it. All right, so this is with regards to those type of transactions, the basis of which is found in the earlier books or in the classical books. Now, there are many transactions which are contemporary transactions. All right. Contemporary transactions. We can find the answer for them in the principles that Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam has laid down in Sharia. However, there are contemporary transactions, the basis of which is not found in the earlier books or the classical books. One outrageous example that comes to mind is binary options. I don't know if anyone has heard of binary options. Anyone heard of binary options? So binary options is like basically traded on the exchange. What happens, just very briefly and quickly, is that they don't actually invest to actually buy a share. But what they invest in is they actually say, okay, I'll put forth, say, $50, and there is an expiry time. All right, there's an expiry time. If this share, so there's different types of this, by the way, but this is just an example. If this share reaches $1.40 before the expiry time, all right, that means basically the investor has won. So he will get a payout. All right, he will get a payout. And if it doesn't reach that, if it doesn't reach $1.40 until the expiry time, then basically whatever he has invested, say for example in this case $50, then he has lost those $50. He has lost that $50. It is a kind of gambling. All right, if you look at it on the surface, it is a kind of gambling. Anyway, this is a contemporary type of transaction, and there are many other transactions as well which are contemporary. Of them, the very famous one is the insurance. All right, insurance is a contemporary transaction. All right, although some scholars, base its impermissibility or permissibility on bay'ul gharar. However, bay'ul gharar is not actually a bay', it's not a type of transaction. All right, it's a principle rather than being a transaction in and of itself. All right, and the way that insurance schemes work today, in that particular, as that concept, it wasn't found in the earlier times. It wasn't found in the earlier times. So where it is a contemporary ruling or a contemporary issue, then obviously you will not find any differences or any opinions among the classical scholars, because it wasn't found in those times, right? This type of transaction wasn't found in those times. So obviously then we will only look at the opinions of the contemporary scholars, all right? So with regards to others, so just, very quickly, those which have a classical basis in the classical books, then in those we will be giving preference to the differences of opinion amongst the classical scholars. However, with contemporary issues, obviously we have no choice but to mention the opinions of the contemporary scholars. Next one, deductive reasoning of scholars and references. All right, so obviously we'll be looking at why the scholars held that opinion. So we'll be looking at the reason, meaning the proofs. The proofs. So obviously we'll be looking at if they used a hadith, then we will be mentioning the hadith, and then we'll be mentioning that what reasoning did they use to derive this ruling from this hadith. All right, because even if you look at any statement, you can have 2 or 3 different interpretations of that statement. Right? Similarly with some hadith, there are different interpretations of the hadith. So we'll look at how or what reasoning they used to derive that ruling from that particular hadith or from that particular ayah. So we'll be looking at that as well. And obviously we'll be looking at the references as well. So ayah of the Quran or the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or a principle which has been established from an ayah or the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and so on and so forth. We'll also be looking at refutations, inshallah. Also be looking at refutations. So obviously when there is a difference of opinion, one scholar uses a certain type of reasoning to derive a ruling from the same hadith, and the person who has a different opinion, the scholar who has a different opinion, uses that same hadith but with a different reasoning, from a different angle, right? But obviously, scholars gave preference to one interpretation or one reasoning over the other, and they had their reasons for it, right? So obviously then they refuted the other scholar's point of view, with respect obviously, but they refuted the other scholar's point of view. So where appropriate, inshallah, we'll be mentioning those refutations as well. We'll be mentioning those refutations as well. So for example, if we said that, okay, Imam Abu Hanifa said this, and he used this hadith, and he used this reasoning, and then Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah said this, and he used this reasoning from this hadith, then we will say that, Imam Abu Hanifa said that, this reasoning cannot be used for this reason, or this hadith cannot be used for this reason, and so on and so forth. So this is what I mean by refutations. The next one is that we will also be mentioning a preferred opinion. We will also be mentioning a preferred opinion. And as far as possible, I will refer to the scholars whom, inshallah, I find reliable. And inshallah, I will be mentioning what the preferred opinion is. A lot of the time, the safest option is the preferred opinion. A lot of the time, the safest option is not necessarily the preferred opinion, because there might be other advantages of going with the less conservative option, or the less conservative opinion, right? So we'll be mentioning that as well, inshallah. So we'll also be mentioning a preferred opinion. By the way, you don't have to take that preferred opinion per se. Inshallah, because we'll be discussing in quite a lot of detail, perhaps you can, make, inshallah, educated judgments to be able to follow through with those transactions, or take a step back from certain transactions, inshallah, in your daily lives. Okay, so I think we will stop there, inshallah. So jurisprudential rulings. Then the next thing that we'll be discussing under methodology will be contemporary issues, inshallah. And we will discuss that next week, since we only have about 7 to 8 minutes left, inshallah. One question, inshallah, very quickly. Yep. Sorry? Inheritance? No. No. So inshallah, inheritance, perhaps Sheikh Abdullah might cover it one day. Sheikh Abdullah here? So he might cover it one day, inshallah. So he might do a workshop or a course, inshallah, on inheritance. But the scope of this course is not going to be inheritance. It won't fall under this scope. All right? Last one?
Are you discussing anything about taxation?
Taxation? A little bit. A little bit, yes, inshallah.
In the example for regulating the price, the hadith was mentioned that in the preference to the interest of market, the hadith given was prohibited. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited the sale of urbanite to a nomadic.
Yes.
But the example given was the opposite. It was a sale by.
No, sorry, urbanite for the nomadic. Urbanite for the nomadic. So did I put there to the nomadic? Okay. So it's urbanite for the nomadic. So bay'ul hadiru lil badi. لِلْبَادِي, meaning to make it more clear, the sale of the urbanite on behalf of the nomadic. On behalf of the nomadic. So in essence, he takes the stuff from him and then he sells it on his behalf. And obviously the agent gives him the price, whatever. Right? So he sells it on his behalf. So selling for the nomadic or on behalf of the nomadic. Does that make sense, inshallah? All right, so we'll stop here, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.